Let's do it.
All right. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So um obviously, one of the big things in the battle of the diets is the idea of plant-based versus keto. Are we supposed to burn sugar or fat for energy, and which is healthier in the long run?
Our body burns both. The most important thing is the source of those carbohydrates and fats, and I encourage people to get all their macronutrients, their fat, their protein, and their carbohydrates from whole plant food sources.
Great. And do plant-based sources of saturated fats, such as coconut and certain nuts, pose the same health risks as animal-based saturated fats? And what intake levels are safe?
So the tropical oils, coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and palm oil, increase one's LDL cholesterol, which is considered undeniably the primary driver of our primary killer, heart disease. Drive it up just like butter, just like other animal fats and tallow and lard. And so we should not only, so to reduce our LDL as low as possible, we reduce three things: trans fats, saturated fats, and dietary cholesterol. And when reducing saturated fats, we're not just reducing animal fats, we're reducing all fats that are hard at room temperature, including coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and palm oil, which are found in a lot of various processed junk foods.
Thank you. And is what is the impact of insulin resistance on fats from plants such as nuts, seeds, coconut, and avocados?
The increase in insulin resistance you get by either infusing fat into the bloodstream or having people just eat a high-fat meal is restricted to saturated fats,
Okay.
presumably trans fats as well, though I don't know if that's actually been tested. And so, but if you have somebody, eat an avocado, you don't see a rise in insulin resistance that you would get having someone, drink some dairy cream or something.
Great. And what is seed oil? What and why is it so vilified? And is it actually worse than other oils?
So seed oils, oils made from seeds. So they're talking about, safflower oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, etc. Each of these oils have a different kind of nutrient composition, so it's hard to kind of sweep them all together. But they're all processed. They're all, deodorized. They're all processed in such a way that actually causes the formation of about a 0.5% of trans fats, and causes the formation of toxins such as acrolein, 3-MCPD. And so in general, ideally we should get all our fats from whole food sources. If we are going to do an oil, it would be from a non-tropical oil, unless we're just using it for massage oil or something, and it would be unprocessed. So something like extra virgin olive oil would not have the trans fats and the heat-induced toxins that any of the processed oils like canola would. But if you are going to do a processed oil, then canola probably healthiest just because it's got some more omega-3s than the others.
Okay, because you often hear in, I would say, unreliable sources that like canola oil is really bad, and I think it's lumped in with the seed oil, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
That with the rapeseed oil. So there's nothing uniquely bad other than maybe some of the processing with regard to the seed oils.
Well, presumably they're all processed in the same way. I don't think you can get kind of an unprocessed vegetable oil.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I mean, but I mean, this is most calorie dense, food substance on the planet, about 120 calories per tablespoon. You could get a lot in nutrition for those 120 calories that you'd be wasting, primarily if you use an oil. Although there's some, fat soluble nutrients still in there.
So reminiscent to the Times cover, butter is back. It seems that tallow, beef tallow, is
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? What should people be aware of with regard to eating French fries and other foods with beef tallow?
So tallow not only has a lot of saturated fats, these long chain saturated fats like palmitic acid, which increase our LDL cholesterol, but also contains trans fats. Naturally, ruminant fats, meat and dairy, contain Trans fats about 1.5%. Ideally, we'd reduce our trans fat intake to zero and eliminate or dramatically reduce concentrated sources of saturated fat. So tallow would not be what we should cook our French fries in, but we shouldn't be eating French fries. If you are going to eat French fries, air fry them, and they contain about 90% less of the crispy carb toxin acrylamide when air fried instead of deep fried.
Thank you. Does a 16-hour daily fast window often offer proven health benefits, and what guidelines should one follow if you want to try something like that?
Yes, but it matters when. If so, there's early time restricted feeding and late time restricted feeding. You're either, skipping breakfast or skipping supper. And one's bad for you, one's good for you. And the good one is early time restricted feeding. So if anything, we skip supper, not breakfast. The same food eaten in the morning is less fattening, cause less of a triglyceride bump, cause less of a blood sugar spike than the exact same food, exact same number of calories eaten in the evening. We should try to shove as many calories earlier in the day as possible. Ideally, breakfast would be the biggest meal of the day, but at least lunch. And our body's just better able to handle junk in the morning. So if you're going to eat those French fries, have them for breakfast.
Okay, great. So you've spoken about, and I believe I may get this term wrong, like biothermogenesis, or when your body heats up to convert calories. I probably killed the term. Where
Well, you mean there's just resting metabolic rate, which you can up and down,
Okay. So
or there's the thermic effect of foods.
yeah, well, I thought there was something where like your body heats up at a certain time of the day to convert food into calories. I may have gotten that wrong. But basically, I was saying like, so what time is the window? That's where I was going to basically get to. That would be ideal. Like, so is like eight, is it 8 to 4?
You're restricting less than 12 hours a day. So
Okay.
so at least half of the time you're fasting.
All right, great. Thank you. And so on raw diets, can people get by with things just like sprouts and green vegetables? And if so, what might they be missing in there? If not,
Right.
what might they be missing?
Well, if anyone is going to eat a largely raw diet, needs to get a book called Becoming Raw by Davis and Molina. And otherwise, they are at extraordinary risk for nutrient deficiencies. In fact, the medical literature on raw foodists is just miserable. These long-term raw foodists just have really bad health statistics. Even something like low levels of something like beta carotene in their blood, which is used as kind of a proxy for healthy food intake. And part of that is because cooking actually enhances the absorption of carotenoids, for example, so you get more lycopene eating processed tomato products like tomato sauce than you do, or tomato juice, than you do eating raw tomatoes. You get 4 times more beta carotene in your bloodstream eating cooked carrots compared to raw carrots. Now, there are some nutrients that are relatively heat sensitive, such as vitamin C, folate, such that if you microwave your broccoli for 2 minutes, you cut about 15% of the vitamin C, but it's like fine. Then just eat 6 florets of cooked broccoli instead of 5 florets of raw broccoli, and you're set. The important thing is that you're eating your fruits and vegetables however you eat them, with the exception of deep frying, like tempura. And so, whichever way will get you to stuff your face with as many fruits and vegetables as possible. Although the one thing raw foodies really do get right is huge salads, massive salads. That's fantastic. Let's throw some nuts on there to maximize absorption of those fat-soluble nutrients, or avocado, or pumpkin seeds, or some other kind of seed, and let's throw some beans. And if you insist on doing it raw, then sprouted lentils or something. But yeah, huge salads every day would be a great idea for everybody,
Great.
except for little kids who don't have the stomach capacity.
So I get something like raw until 4, where they eat part of the day raw and then have cooked food later in the day. Is that a good balance?
I mean, I think the most important thing, the benefits of raw, at least the short-term benefits of raw, before they start seeing some of the long-term negative consequences, is they're just avoiding junk food. Anything that gets you to avoid junk food. Like if you went on a don't eat anything that starts with the letter D diet, you'd be healthier because people wouldn't eat donuts. I mean, it's just like, and so when people go raw, all of a sudden they stop eating all that ultra-processed crap found in a box and bag, and so if you just say don't eat unprocessed foods before 4, you'd probably get very similar benefits.
Okay.
So, I don't care. So whether someone's eating a cooked sweet potato before 4, or whether they're eating, some, you can imagine some, raw confection or something. Better eat the sweet potato.
Excellent. So some people say that fruit is hybridized today and feeds yeast, mold, fungus, and cancers. And they claim that we should minimize or avoid it. What does the research show?
Look, I mean, well, anyone who, any medical professional, and I say that in quotes, who, says something about Candida syndrome or something like that, I mean, you should watch my videos on nutritionfacts.org. They just are they they got their medical degree on blogs on the internet, not based on the medical literature. And so there just is no such thing. And so I mean, it's just kind of this naturopathic made up syndrome. There's so many of them out there. And so that should just be instant red flag. I also have videos about mold. Now there are mycotoxins, they're, like aflatoxin, moldy peanuts. I mean, there's real issues, but if anyone's doing like mold testing in your house, or I mean, there's just this whole industry to prey on vulnerable, scared people who they make scared and vulnerable by spouting all sorts of nonsense. And coincidentally, they sell the testing kits. They sell the supplements that are going to cure you, or the foods that whatever. Outrageous. So no, fruit is the healthiest thing. So, the Global Burden of Disease Study is the largest study of disease risk factors for disease and death in human history, found that the number one food people aren't getting enough of is actually fruit. We would actually save more lives if people ate more fruit than people eating anything else.
And what about the fact that a lot of the fruit has been hybridized over the years, and they'll point out that a carrot today never, wasn't that, hundreds of years ago. Does it matter?
Well, yeah, of course it matters. It's Cows are much better now because they're bigger. They're more. I mean, they're brighter. I mean, we have. I mean, some foods have been selectively bred in a way to make them less nutritious. But in general, they're making bigger, more, they're making plants that produce more fruit, more, bigger carrots, whatever. It's usually start out some like small little bitter thing, and then they make it bigger and juicier and brighter colored. And, many of those pigments are actually beneficial. And so, and of course, the more productive these plants are, the cheaper it is. So, in general, that's a good thing that, so, I mean, it's kind of an unusual situation. I mean, something like a watermelon really was kind of selectively bred for this kind of candy-like quality. Um, but look, if you're gonna eat something sweet, watermelon is one of the best choices compared to almost anything else sweet in the supermarket, right? Now, is there even better than that? Sure, but I mean, I'm there's this, conception that, foods aren't as healthy as they used to be, the crop, soil, nutrient depletion, something like that. That is, BS line from someone trying to sell you supplements. Oh, yeah, we used to be able to get all our nutrients from soil, but now we can't because the soil's depleted. And so, buy my supplement for insurance, blah, blah, blah. But, crop nutrient measurements have been made, for the last half century, more than a half century. This health of the soil is closely tracked. And so I got a video called Crop Nutrient Decline, talks about it. And again, it's like, oh, yeah, you can cherry pick some nutrient that's maybe 10% lower in broccoli produced day than it was produced a long time ago. But so fine, again, eat 1/10 more broccoli. You cannot for a plant to be made, it has to have a certain number of nutrients, right? It has to have all the nutrients that a broccoli needs to become a broccoli. And if it doesn't, guess what? There is no broccoli. The fact that there is a broccoli in front of you means that there was sufficient nutrition in the soil to create a broccoli. That's all you need to know.
All right, perfect. Now on the store shelf, I guess there's a new chemical that they're using to increase the longevity of food that produce on the store shelf, such as a peel. My
Mhm.
understanding is that they don't need to label it, and if I'm correct, it can be sprayed on organic food. Um,
Oh.
what is the what is appeal and what is the health ramifications of appeal?
So it's a coating of basic monodiglycerides. It's just one of the rare emulsifiers that actually doesn't appear to hurt the gut microbiome. So the benefit is that you have more produce, cheaper produce, less food waste. It's a win-win-win.
Okay. And on salt, so we obviously need some sort of salt in our diet to
No, you need sodium from food. You don't need, no
well,
one needs
okay.
salt. Salt.
Oh, okay. Can you make the distinction between sodium from food and salt?
Well, I mean, we evolved for millions of years without salt shakers and Kentucky Fried Chicken, and it's like, landlocked people. We're nowhere by the ocean, and how did we exist? We don't need to add salt to food. So yeah, no. So you can get all the sodium, which is vitamin, essential mineral from just whole healthy foods. You don't need to add extra salt. And in fact, salt is the number one dietary risk factor for death on planet Earth, increasing the risk of death from heart disease and stroke and kidney disease and on down the list. And so we should all try to minimize our sodium intake, at least under 1,500 milligrams a day, which is the American Heart Association recommendation, unless you have, on certain drugs or salt wasting syndromes, or I mean, there's certain diseases in which your kidneys insufficiently retain sodium, and so you have to actually, take sodium. But unless kind of prescribed by some non-loony doctor, I would not be adding any kind of salt. And so, of course, people want to sell you, fancy salt, real salt, Himalayan salt. They are profiting off your disease and death.
Okay, so if someone eats a well-rounded whole food plant-based diet, they never need to ever see a grain
You
of
don't even have, it doesn't have to be well-rounded. You just take out a calculator. Try
okay.
to make a diet where you wouldn't get enough sodium. I mean, we get on average 10 times more sodium than the body actually needs. Yeah, we don't need to add salt at the table. We don't need to add salt in the kitchen. Now you say, well, wait a second. If I don't add salt, everything tastes like cardboard, right? Okay, so you add potassium salt. You add potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride, and so then you don't have to worry about the sodium. Unless you have kidney issues in which your body can't, get rid of enough potassium. But that's how you make food salty, with potassium salt.
Excellent. So what are the simplest things with regard to either specific food or habits, such as exercise and good sleep, that without changing one's entire lifestyle, people can do and feel it in their everyday life?
Besides what and what?
Well, are there some simple foods, with
Oh,
like changing
yeah.
everything
Yeah.
and
No, if there were
also
just three things
habits?
I'd add to someone's diet, it'd be berries, the healthiest fruits, greens, the healthiest vegetables, and legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, associated with the longest longevity gains. The centerpiece of protein for every single blue zone population in history. So beans, greens, and berries. And if there were just three foods I would remove from people's diets, it would be trans fats, which are still legal and killing about 500,000 people around the world every year. Legal in some places, no longer in the U.S. And number two would be processed meat, bacon, ham, hot dogs, lunch meat, sausage. These are known carcinogens, increasing our risk of colorectal cancer, the number one killer of non-smokers, and number one cancer killer. And then liquid candy, soda, sugar-sweetened beverages. I would throw those off the list. All right, hold
And
on.
now,
I'm getting hot here. I'm gonna
sure, no
be right back
worries.
here. Oh my God. All right. I'm
All
back.
right. So, with regard
This
to
is the Gregor striptease. If I get an answer wrong, I have to take off a piece of clothing. That's how it works.
all right, I'm gonna throw some easy ones then for you. So with regard to deli meat, my understanding is it is a class one carcinogen, and
Yeah.
and it says it is, it's in the same class as tobacco. What does
Yep.
that mean?
So yeah, group one carcinogen. So this is the IARC, the official body of the World Health Organization that determines what is and is not cancer causing. This is not a represent. The grouping is not a representation of how much cancer it's causing, but how sure we are that it is or is not cancer causing. So processed meat, big ham, hot dogs, lunch meat, is a known human carcinogen. Group 1, it's the highest level, including, asbestos and plutonium and cigarette smoke, etc. We know it causes cancer. How much cancer? 18% increased risk for every 50 grams a day. So it's like you eat one hot dog a day, increase your risk of colorectal cancer 18%, which is approximately how much increased risk you'd get of lung cancer living with a smoker. So, heavy secondhand smoke exposure increases your risk of lung cancer by about 15%, which is number one cancer killer of smokers, whereas colorectal cancer is number one killer of non-smokers. So, just like we wouldn't want to, smoke around our kids, we should not send them to school with a bologna sandwich.
So T. Colin Campbell has written extensively on how animal protein specifically promotes cancer. Do you see that in the research that you review that even more so than how much exposure to the initial carcinogen, the amount of animal protein promoting cancer impacts whether or not you're more likely to get cancer?
We certainly see that in laboratory animal experiments, which is what he was basing that observation on, where he could take rats, give them aflatoxin, which is this mold toxin, which causes liver cancer, and then you could basically kind of turn on and off cancer based on how much, I believe he was using casein, which is a type of milk
Yes.
protein that he was feeding in their diets. And so extrapolated that, saying, well, look, if you look at animal protein consumption in these large observational studies where you follow hundreds of thousands of people over decades, the more animal protein consumption is associated with high risk of many cancers. But of course, along with that animal protein, it's not a purified animal protein like they were given to the rats. There's all sorts of other things, right? There's pollutants, there's toxic pollutants that build up the food chain. So there's, PCBs and dioxins and, organochlorine pesticides like DDT metabolites, still that concentrate, up the food chain in animal fat. Regardless of what component it is, is it the animal fat? Is it the animal protein? Well, they both kind of usually travel together. And so in general, just telling people to follow what Dr. T. Colin Campbell coined, this term whole food plant-based nutrition, is the way to go. In terms of mechanism by which animal protein may increase cancer risk, at sufficient levels, you bump a cancer-promoting growth hormone called IGF-1. There is actually I have a whole bunch of series of videos about it. There's actually a mutation in the IGF-1 axis that basically causes people to become cancer-proof. So as part of our understanding of the role that IGF-1 plays in human cancers, of course, it has other negative effects. IGF-1 has beneficial effects, particularly on growth in children. But once we get to an adult height, we want to really suppress our IGF-1, and we do that by switching from animal protein to plant protein.
Okay. So Jordan Peterson is on a very extreme carnivore diet and claims to eat only beef, salt, and water in an attempt to control his depression and control effects of an autoimmune disorder. And he claims that that's made a significant difference with regard to that. Is it possible for such a diet to have those kind of benefits? And what is the long-term consequences of such a diet?
Well, so if he was cutting out a food that was causing his symptoms, absolutely, right? Some people are sensitive to gluten, for example, right? So you cut out gluten. I mean, but you're not consciously you just if all of a sudden you eat hamburgers or you just eat sweet potatoes, you just eat something, all of a sudden you feel better and you're like, oh my God, sweet potatoes cured me. No, sweet potatoes didn't cure you. Not eating gluten cured you. And there's some people are sensitive to nightshade vegetables. Some people are sensitive to citrus. Some people are sensitive to, about one in, 200 people or so are allergic to wheat or allergic to soy. And soy is found in like everything. And so all of a sudden, if you go on and look, he's cutting out all that processed junk, right? He's not eating donuts. By definition, any diet that cuts out donuts, you get better. Um, so now, of course, but I mean, if you're choosing some kind of mono diet, if you kind of eat some kind of kind of exclusion diet to cut out things if you're uh, suspect that some kind of food is causing you some kind of intolerance. I mean, beef is a terrible food to pick. What are they? At least, I mean, if you want to do a true exclusion diet, you do sweet potatoes and tapioca and things that no one really reacts to, and that won't be increasing your LDL cholesterol. And so, if I were him, I would try adding back healthy foods to find out what it was about his prior diet that led to his problems, and so he can move to a healthier diet and then, live a longer, healthier life.
Thank you. Is high cholesterol a benchmark for cardiovascular disease, or is it the cause of cardiovascular?
Cause. It is undeniably the primary driver, LDL cholesterol, the primary driver of atherosclerotic heart disease. That is the scientific consensus, so we need to drive it as low as possible for as long as possible.
And what would you say to claims that I don't have any research in front of me, claims that people with higher cholesterol levels do better cognitively on performance tests and stuff like that? I don't know if you've heard that before. It's something that floats around the internet.
How could that be? I don't know if that's the case. If that were the case, maybe people you're looking at someone who's malnourished, and so they have a low, cholesterol because they're not eating a lot of food. As opposed to someone who's more well nourished, it might be linked to cognition. But yeah, now that's something. I mean, in fact, the atherosclerotic changes in the intracranial arteries, atherosclerosis basically inside the brain, may be a primary driver of Alzheimer's disease. Those with total cholesterol 225 or more, 20 times is likely to end up with amyloid plaques in the brains 10 to 15 years later. Um, I've got a lot of videos about the role that high cholesterol plays in the development of dementia. You can, do MRIs. You can correlate the amount of dementia with the narrowing the arteries to memory centers of the brain. You can do autopsy studies. You can look at, the Alzheimer's gene. You can look at like the so-called Nigerian paradox, where in Nigeria they have the highest rates of the Alzheimer's gene, but some of the lowest rates of Alzheimer's disease. How is that possible? Well, what is ApoE, the Alzheimer's gene? It is the primary cholesterol carrier inside the brain. So if your cholesterol is low enough, because they had the diet low in animal fat, then you can forestall some of those genetic effects. And so if you're worried about your brain health, whether from stroke or dementia, you want to be on a cholesterol lowering diet.
And it used to be that it used to be said that if you had cholesterol under 200, you were okay. Is that true, or is that kind of in America and it's still actually high?
No, so having a normal cholesterol in a society where it's normal to drop dead of a heart attack, number one killer, men and women, not necessarily a good thing. Same thing with normal blood pressure. You don't want normal blood pressure where people are dropping dead of strokes. You want ideal blood pressure, meaning no benefit from reducing it further, blood pressure. That's 110/70. We have moved away in recent years from targets for cholesterol, and we're primarily concerned about LDL cholesterol. The only reason we cared about total cholesterol is because it was a proxy for LDL, but now that we can actually measure LDL, we should just go straight to that. So it used to be that the target for LDL cholesterol was 70 for primary prevention, maybe 30 to 50 for secondary prevention, meaning primary prevention is you don't have no known diagnosed heart disease, whereas secondary prevention, you already had a heart attack, trying to prevent a second heart attack. But we really moved away from that with this realization that as low as possible is better. So we really removed targets and just said as low as possible for as long as possible. And so that means reducing concentrated sources of dietary cholesterol, saturated fat, and trans fats, and then adding to our diet foods that actively remove cholesterol from our bodies. This so-called portfolio diet. In July, I'll be doing a webinar on kind of a portfolio plus diet, incorporating everything, found every safe, simple, side effect-free solution to lowering LDL as much as possible, every herb, every spice, every food, every supplement, and then talk about the role that drugs may play for those at high enough risk, such as statins, to lower LDL as low as possible for as long as possible to prevent the number one cause of death.
So many people on the whole food plant-based diet, kind of expect their health to be perfect and all the numbers to fall in line. And yet some struggle with having elevated blood sugar levels, etc. In that particular case, if you're eating already a whole food plant-based diet, what would be ways of lowering your blood sugar levels to the more ideal range?
Probably the number one source of elevated blood sugar levels is excess abdominal fat. So this visceral fat, this deep belly fat that bulges out one's belly, that causes insulin resistance, which increases our blood sugars, and so weight loss would be primarily. But maybe people are eating, too much, refined carb junk, which, spikes one's blood sugars. They're eating saturated fats and, coconut oil, and, they're eating, vegan butter and things like that that increases insulin resistance. So yeah, there's all sorts of ways you could eat a super unhealthy vegan diet.
And when you say abdominal fat, are you talking about the fat that kind of overflows over your belt, or are you talking
No,
about
no, we're talking
the
about
visceral fat?
underneath your abdominal musculature. So it's not the external jiggly fat, which
Okay.
is basically physiologically neutral. I mean, you can take people, you can do liposuction and remove, 10 pounds of fat and get no benefit in terms of blood sugars or cholesterol or anything. It's that deep visceral fat that is under, that bulges out your belly from underneath your musculature, enveloping your internal organs, infiltrating your internal organs, the fat in your liver, the fat infiltrating your pancreas, inside your muscles. This is really the worst kind of fat, but thankfully our body knows that, and so when we start losing weight, it preferentially eliminates that fat first. And so that's why, people, after, oh my God, I lost 100 pounds, but look, I still got this like jiggly whatever under my arms, whatever. That's not what your body cares about, because that's not what's going to kill you. It's that visceral fat, which your body gets rid of first.
Great. So you're doing a 10-part series on nutritionfacts.org on NAD plus. What is it and how can our understanding of it help us live longer?
NAD plus is an essential cofactor for hundreds of enzymes within the body, including the purported anti-aging activities of enzymes called sirtuins. It's actually unclear if NAD levels reliably decline with age, but raising levels can boost the health span and lifespan of a variety of laboratory animals. Whether any of those benefits actually translate to humans, and if so, what are the best ways to raise levels, are the subjects of active scientific inquiry, and so that's where the 10-video series came about. There's four main NAD-boosting supplements on the market: nicotinic acid, nicotinamide riboside, nicotinamide mononucleotide. So it's like a whole alphabet soup: Na, NAM, NMN, NR, NAD, NADH, NAMH, NRH, and tryptophan. Um, and bottom line, basically, NR has been demonstrated to be relatively safe, but not effective, and neither safety nor efficacy have been established for NMN, basically blindly overloading the system with NAD precursors, like all these supplements are. It really may not be the best way to go about restoring NAD levels. The body really seems too smart to allow such blunt incursions to actually affect tissue levels, as it does in laboratory animals. You give these same supplements to rats, and levels in their tissues, in their muscles, for example, actually goes up. And so, oh, okay, and they have all these benefits. So wait a second, why don't we see those same benefits with humans? Well, you give those same supplements to humans, and the levels in the tissues, levels in the blood goes up, levels in the tissues actually don't go up. Our body is evidently smarter than the rats' bodies. So these supplements are really just profit-making distractions from more natural approaches. Broadly, there are three main ways to increase NAD levels. Increasing the supply of NAD precursors is really just one of them. The other two are have the body make more by boosting the enzyme that makes NAD in the body. Why not just make more of your own, called NAMPT, and have the body use less? There are certain enzymes that excessively eat up NAD, and so you can suppress those. So basically, the natural approaches to boosting NAD, spoiler alert, amping NAMPT through exercise. And so when you exercise, your body actually makes more NAD, and you can actually prove it. And actually, one of the few things that actually increases NAD in your tissues is exercise. And then we can inhibit excessive NAD degradation by suppressing the two NAD-consuming enzymes, PRP1 and CD38, which are involved in reducing oxidative DNA damage and inflammation. So eating an anti-inflammatory diet and reducing your exposure to things that damage your DNA, pro-oxidants, are ways that we can maintain levels of NAD no matter what stage of life we're in.
Great. What are oxalates and what do we need to know about them to protect our health?
So oxalates are components of certain plants, concentrated in certain plants, such as beet greens, spinach, and Swiss chard, which and some people absorb them better than others. And so for people who are super absorbers, they can end up with such high levels of oxalic acid, it actually crystallizes out in their kidneys, forming kidney stones, which is the most common type of kidney stone, calcium oxalate stones. And so for those, and now you don't know if you're a super absorber until your first stone. And that's can be a painful experience. And so that's why we encourage everyone to not eat excessive levels of oxalates, because you don't really know if you're a super absorber or not. And there's other things that can increase your risk, such as taking antibiotics, because there's gut bacteria that eat up oxalates that if you wipe out, you can have more absorption. There's certain types of surgeries that can increase oxalate absorption. And when you make a smoothie, so if you make like a green smoothie, you put spinach, that increases absorption more than if you just kind of eat the spinach. So there's certain kind of risk factors that put you at higher risk. Basically, we should not eat cups, plural, of those three greens a day. So eat a cup of spinach, fine. A cup of beet greens, fine. A cup of Swiss chard, fine. But no more than that. 1 cup a day. Now, all the other greens, they're super healthy. So yeah, I mean, but just don't eat too much. And the other greens like kale and collard, you can eat as much as you want. Same thing, you don't want to eat more than a cup of nuts every day because of excess oxalates. No more than a few star fruit, super high in oxalates. No more than a teaspoon of chaga mushroom powder, very high in oxalates. What are some really other high oxalate foods? There's just a few of them. So I've got a whole video series where I just say, these are the high oxalate foods. Don't eat more than this, 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 and this of these, and you should be fine.
So, for someone who is eating a whole food plant-based diet, isn't eating meat or fish, doesn't drink alcohol, and yet has high uric acid and gout symptoms,
Oh,
what would you suggest? I know you mentioned tart cherry juice or tart
mm.
cherries. Is there anything else that should be in the diet or
Yeah,
should
so I
not be
mean,
in the
so
diet?
it's caused by a meat sweet diet. So two things raise uric acid: meat and sugar. So if you're vegan chugging Coca-Cola, you can have really high uric acid levels. However, if you're on a whole food plant-based diet, still have high uric acid levels, well, you should be happy that you have much lower risk of neurodegenerative disease, because uric acid is an antioxidant. So you have this antioxidant flowing through your brain all of your life, reduces your risk of all the major neurodegenerative diseases. Unfortunately, if it's too high, you do actually end up at risk for gout. Actually end up at risk it crystallizing in your joints, causing very painful arthritis. And so it's actually a sweet spot, interestingly. So people have really low uric acid are at higher risk of these neurodegenerative diseases. And so yeah, so by eating a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet, you really should be hitting the target. But of course, it's a bell curve, and people can just genetically, have high uric acid levels. So the two things, so tart cherry juice can certainly help, or screw the juice, get tart cherries. You can get tart cherries in a can. You can get them frozen. You can, get them fresh if you live at the right season, right place, and with the right farmers markets. Water, right? We're just making rock candy in your bloodstream. And so it's all about concentration. And so if you have high uric acid in the blood, what do we got to do? We got to dilute it. So you should drink like a cup of water every waking hour.
Okay, excellent.
And, get up in the middle of the night and drink some water. Have water, it's because you want to constantly, You want to be, if
Really?
you don't have to pee, you're not drinking enough water to reduce your uric acid levels. Again, this is
Really?
only someone who actually has gout. And of course, the first thing is get rid of the meat, get rid of the salty junk, but excuse me, sugary junk. Yeah, still too high, still high. And it's not so much high. It's are you if you're having gout attacks. If you're having gout attacks, then before starting some of these drugs, which can have toxic consequences, I would yeah start the tart cherry juice, hydration. See if you can cut down on attacks. And if you're still having attacks, then move on to drugs.
And so if you have high uric acid, but you're not having gout attacks, that's fine. There's no
Oh, that's
rheumatoid
fine.
arthritis.
That's actually yeah, there may actually be a benefit to that.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah, and so yeah, so I mean, you know that, but it can like scare a doctor, and doctor be like, "Oh my God, your uric acid is 9.2 or whatever. We got to put you on drugs." No, I mean, we only care if it's actually crystallizing out. Now, I mean, they'll check for what are called tophi, these little crystals of uric acid, which don't necessarily have to be harmful. You get them in your earlobes and stuff. I mean, if it is crystallizing out, even if it's not painful, yeah, I would lower it, right? I mean, if you're getting these little rocks in your earlobes and in your tendons, and even if it's not painful, yeah, that's not good. But if you're not actually experiencing symptoms, I would not. I wouldn't treat it.
Great, thank you. So, grass-fed beef, does it have any health benefits? Like what, that's like the new market thing is like, oh, it's grass finished or whatever. Does that matter in the large scheme of things?
Well, I mean, it's better than regular beef, and only because it has more phytonutrients. Why? Because they're eating plants. They're eating, the green leafy vegetables. What's healthier, a green leafy vegetable or grain? Greens are healthier than grains. I'm not saying grains aren't good for you, but greens are even better. And so if you give them grass, then they have a little bit more, beta carotene and, stuff in their blood. But of course, just absolute, one carrot has more than a whole, freezer full of grass-fed beef, but if your choice was between the two beefs, one's better, or less worse. But you still there's so much saturated fat that you're not doing your body any favors.
Is there any benefit to doing like a 36-hour fast on a regular basis or or is it just intermittent fasting? Does that do the trick?
Well, we do have good evidence from these fasting mimicking diets, the Volter Longo, Prolong kind of thing, where it's shown that, 5 days, going 5 days a month, or going for a 5 day and eating, 1 to 200 calories a day for those 5 days. Of course, you don't have to buy some fancy, ridiculous supplements. I mean, you could just, eat, above ground vegetables for 5 days or something. It has benefits that last literally months. So 3 months later, you can actually show benefits from just that 5 days. Now, that's not technically a fast. You're still eating a couple hundred calories a day. The most important thing is that it's strictly plant-based, because you're going to drop your IGF-1. But yeah, it actually did show benefits.
So what would 5 day, I guess, fast mimicking diet look like without all the, the
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no. Above ground vegetables and water.
okay, so not root vegetables, above
Right.
ground vegetables. So that means not
Any vegetable you want, but
okay.
no salt, right? No flavorings. No, no. We're talking just straight above ground vegetables and water, period, for 5 days.
Okay. And watermelon's a fruit, darn it. Okay.
Yep.
Do you have to go? I want to respect your
I got 1 minute.
okay. And so just a couple of internet things. One, bananas. I've seen it said that bananas lower the antioxidant impact of berries when you mix them into a smoothie.
Correct.
That
By
is
30%. So add some more berries, or cook your bananas and then freeze them, and then destroys the enzyme that's hurting the berries. Or use freeze-dried bananas, or use mangoes, or use frozen cooked sweet potatoes. There's lots of ways you can get around it, or just mix them together and get 30% less benefit from your blueberries. You're still getting 70% of the benefit, even if you mix it with bananas.
can lowering our salt intake increase our insulin resistance? That's another internet thing.
No, that's I've never heard of that.
All right, excellent. Well, I think that concludes our time. So thank you so much for all of your wonderful information. Really greatly appreciate it,
Now
Doctor.
that was fun. It was like a lightning round. I hope it's rare that I can stuff so much information in an interview. So I really appreciate it. And if people are interested in more, they can. All my work is available free at nutritionfacts.org.
Great. Thank you.